Welcome to the MMHP and the 989. Podcasting from the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame in downtown Bay City. Channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history. From the city by the bay. And now, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and your host, Scott Baker.
Legends Hall of Fame here.
Michigan Rock and Roll Legends.
Michigan Rock and Roll.
Yes,
I'm going to get this right sooner or later. We have been blessed to come down here and be able to broadcast straight out of this area and get to show it off to our guests. And tonight we have a very special mid-Michigan guest, one that we have been looking forward to talking to because he is the key to so much history around here. He's seen every bit of it. He's been there for all of it, and he's documented most of it, not to mention awards and press to it. Mr. Bob Martin, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, Scott.
Thank you, Bob, for coming, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
No, I'm so happy you wanted to come and do this. There's actually some people we've asked that they don't want to do this, and it's like, well, it is what it is.
Man, no, it's fun. I love chatting about this stuff.
Well, certainly.
Oh man. Well, tonight I want to tell the listeners we are lacking two members. It was uncontrollable summer issues going on right now, but Gary, Dr. J is in the house along with myself, and it's the first time that we've manned the boards as a duo, and you're still going to get a million questions, Bob, so you're in for it,
ready.
okay?
Okay.
But take us back, Bob, to the Review magazine here in Saginaw, Michigan. It's Tri-Cities magazine for entertainment, politics, everything. I mean, you've Jack Handy's awards. I mean, sports. You've tackled everything, and this has always been free to this very day.
Right.
Online and in print now.
Yep.
After all these years, where was the start of that whole idea?
The start of that whole thing came about basically. Initially, I was going to become an attorney. My family is all attorneys. My uncle was a judge. My two other uncles and my dad started this law firm, Martin & Martin, in Saginaw, which was very prominent. And when I was growing up, which I graduated in 1972, so it was a real volatile political time right then, and a lot was happening with music, I mean, God, I can remember when I was, 15 years old, seeing the MC5 for the first time, and and all these bands, and so music was always a big part of my life. But anyway, be that as it may, when I went to college, I majored in journalism and pre-law, and basically when I graduated, I went over to England for a year. I got a scholarship at the University of Sussex in Brighton, England. And that was a really interesting time. I arrived there in 1975. And actually, punk started happening the next year. But I can remember at that campus, bands like The Specials and, English Beat coming in and all these bands that no one had ever heard of, which interestingly enough, similar to what you guys are doing, the school had a little school TV station. And so we would do this weekly music program and interview people coming in. We actually interviewed David Bowie once on that. When he was doing his station-to-station tour. So I got really, really more engaged than I'd been previously. And then when I came back, and I wanted to go into environmental law, and because I've always been a very active person, very activist, and wanted to go into environmental law, so I went down to Cooley Law School, and basically when by the time I got to my second year, I just got really disillusioned because the more I learned, there were just all these obstacles, like, standing issues and ripeness of cases, and it was very demoralizing to see how difficult it was, and still is, to actually protect the environment, as sad as that is. Mm-hmm. Growing up with a father as an attorney, I just, I know what's involved, and I just said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to do this. So I dropped out, of law school, much to the consternation of my parents, and I decided I was going to start a newspaper, start a magazine, and go into journalism. But I didn't have the wherewithal to do it or the money, and my parents weren't really into it. So ironically, I got a job at the time. My first job, journalistic-wise, was with a AM radio station here in Bay City, Michigan, called WRDD, and it was the AM equivalent of WHNN. It was like their AM sister station.
Wow.
And so I did that for 6 months maybe. And then the owner of the station at the time was Bob Leggett, and he was a really cool guy. But he said he was going to close the station, close the AM station. And they wanted to know if I wanted to transfer to Minneapolis. I'm like, I don't think so. No. So at that point, I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. So at the time, there was so much music going on, and there wasn't any real source to find out what was going on in each of the cities. It's like Saginaw had their thing going, Bay City had their thing going. They had the Bay City Times, they had the Saginaw News, they had the Mill and Daily News, but they had nothing really connecting them all together. Mm-hmm. And especially with the clubs, of course there was no internet or nothing. So, I said, you know what? I want to try to do this, some way to bring them all together, to getting more interconnected. So, the idea was, I grew up at a time, I subscribed to Creed magazine. I, loved, Rolling Stone, Village Voice, all those underground papers. I said, I want to do something like that here, And so that was basically it, I had a partner at the time, and, we put out our first issue. It had
What year was this?
1979.
79.
Yeah.
Who was your partner, Bob?
It's actually Vern Pocock, who a lot of people might know, but he's still around. But and then I had another partner, Jeff Scott, later, and then. So basically our first issue, we put out only 1,000 copies, and we just gave free ads to a bunch of businesses, hoping that they would get some result and then want to buy ads in the future.
Right.
And I remember laying it out. This was before desktop publishing. I remember laying it out, the first issue out myself, with on a literally a Mickey Mouse light table that my parents had got me when I was a kid, that had a little Mickey Mouse on the top of it.
Wow.
And I would use wax and stuff and do the layouts, and then take it down to the printer, right? And
Wow.
Anyway, I basically, lived in my basement, my parents' basement. I started it when I was 24. So I lived in my parents' basement from the time I was 24 until the time I was 26, because I was just investing everything back into it and trying to grow it. And then eventually it did, we finally moved to Hamilton Street in 1981. The scene was blowing up more. People were responding. It was a lot different then, in the sense that, building a staff, there were people that would come forward, had one amazing gourmet cook that was actually a teacher at one of the schools, who said, I would love to do a food column, I want to be like Lou Garth, the unknown critic, the unknown, invisible critic, And so she would write these amazing reviews of all these different restaurants that were popping up, and then that added more dimension to it, and then sports reporting, and then just do it that way. And then basically, things really kind of exploded from there. Of course, the thing that really, really helped us grow the most was when we adopted the singles-only ads, because we used to have 3 or 4 pages of these singles ads, and no one was really doing it at the time. I was getting the paper published at the time down in Lapeer, and there was the printer was owned by printing company was owned by a brother and sister team, And they said, you should really try these singles ads. It's like you charge people this much money to run their stuff, and then when people reply, you get $2. And tried it, and it just blew up.
How much would it cost for somebody to put a singles ad in the review back then? Do you remember?
Yeah, we'd charge them $5.
Okay.
And, they'd have 50 words, and they'd have to pay 10 cents for every word after that. And then to reply, you'd have to send in $3. And all of a sudden, I'd be getting these, like, envelopes. The postman hated us. I mean, these envelopes would be coming in, like, 20 of them, and, it'd be coming out, there'd be, like, $80 one day, and it's all in cash, and all in singles, So it's like, but I'll tell you, it paid the bills for many a year, and that just blew up. I mean, to the point where, we were getting, $3, $4, $5 a month from it.
Wow.
20, 30 years ago. So that was some money.
That's big money back then.
And that helped. And then, of course, like with everything else, then as the online stuff started moving and evolving in the 90s and early 2000s, you had, all the dating sites, the national ones that started popping up, that just like everything else siphoned it all up into those platforms.
Yeah. Things have so changed since the onset of the internet. Obviously, for print, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Were your issues dealing with politics right from the get-go, or did you kind of stay away from that?
No. I remember very clearly our very first issue, the very first story I wrote was about gasohol and ethanol that was coming right out of here, Bay City, that was being manufactured by, it's escaping me right now, but there was someone here, a farmer, that was like actually doing it.
Wow.
So, we did that. I remember the third issue, I actually got my first press credential when Teddy Kennedy was running for president, came into Delta College, and, was able to go to that and pose a few questions to him and stuff like that, So, politics has always been a part of it, But I mean, when I say that too, I mean, my goal with it wasn't so much the national stuff as it was, local and statewide stuff,
Like, and also you've always been covering things that people are unaware of, under the radar. Under the radar
stuff, right, yeah. But and the other thing there that I think really helped, and I've always been real adamant about too, is like, we've always done a lot of political forums during races, with local races. And I always am really, it's kind of like, too often with that stuff, it just gets truncated, like you got like a 30-second sound bite, or, there's nothing in depth on it. So when I do those forums, I want to, give the candidates time to actually express more than like 50 words about what they're all about or something, so people can get a better understanding. And, made no judgment on it, it's just, this is where they stand, this is where they stand, this is what they said, And people really appreciated that too, And sadly, I remember from that, there's so many places like Delta College used to do these, candidate forums. They would have different reporters from the Saginaw News, Bay City Times, Midland, me, whatever, broadcast, and they would hold them, and you do these forums, but you don't see that anymore.
Right.
Well, the death of all the papers,
Well, I'm just saying, even with broadcasting
right.
or TV,
television,
they don't have like local broadcasting. They don't really do those forums that much. I mean, I know SVSU did one last year during the races out there at in the theater there. I know, but. Yeah. Anyway, that's always been a part of it. Yeah.
When you fired up that first issue, and you knew you were going to do one, what was the topic? What was like? That's definitely going to be in there, and so is that.
Well, this is kind of bizarre too. So I really didn't know what to call the paper or how to monetize it. So the first couple issues, it was actually called the Bay Area Bargain Review.
Oh yeah.
Because we would let people put these free classifieds in, and then if they sold something, we get a commission. But that was really hard to like monitor. We found that out real quickly. So it didn't take too long to change the title. But basically, at the time, there was only two or three articles we could afford to include in the thing with all the advertising and the size it was in that. And it was basically that piece on the ethanol that we did that I mentioned. And then I think we did the first album review I did was back in '79 I think it might have been Linda Ronstadt's Mad Love or something like that. Or it might have been Bruce Springsteen's The River. Okay. I think it might have been that. One of those.
Well, it came out around the same time.
Right.
So curious, what did you think of Mad Love? Linda Ronstadt kind of dipping
because
her toe in the
punk, man.
It
was the first time anyone really. I mentioned that, and I think Scott Seeberger today commented something about Allison because I went to see Elvis Costello. But I mean, that was the first time anyone really heard that song, and it sold 1 million copies. And I love that album, Mad Dog.
Yeah, I thought she did a great job on that too.
Yeah,
real change of pace for her.
Yeah, right. And I love The River too. I remember seeing. Springsteen in the East Street Band at the Saginaw Civic Center.
Yes.
And
what a show that was. Yeah, we sat right across from Bob Seger. I mean, directly across from us was Seger sitting in the audience.
Yeah, it was so cool because at those shows back then, there was no designated seating. You could just, if you wanted to jam up front, you could jam up front, But I'll never forget he played like 3.5 hours, and then he did that 25-minute version of "It's My Life" by the Animals. I went into this really long rap about coming out of Jersey.
Yeah.
And, he was so much theater. He was as much theater as he was rock.
Elvis Costello told that story last night of how he did radio based on hearing Springsteen. Did he say the same thing at Interlaken?
Yeah, of course he did.
Yeah. It was interesting hearing that. I'm like,
I know it was.
That's cool that he's telling it every night, though. He did a couple Detroit tunes in our set, too, like Detroit-based ones, but I can't remember what they are offhand, but that tied into it, like that era. He blended them in.
Did he do the Back Rack song?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Talked about him, too. Yeah.
I actually know. They played Back Rack before he went on, and I don't think he did any off the Back Rack, but he did do a Roots album song last night.
Yeah.
With
he talked quite a bit about Back Rack and how he passed and working with them, and then he played. I've got that Back Rack Costello album.
Me too.
But I'm pretty sure the song he did was one that they worked on later that was never really.
Okay.
It was pretty cool.
2 records, I think.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Yeah,
if it is, it's probably off that. But it was a long song. It was really pretty complex. Typical Baccarat had all these real weird time signatures. And
he may have done it. I can't remember. I got the set list for both nights here. I was going to talk to you later about that. But it's interesting seeing these national acts like you're speaking about, Springsteen or Linda Ronstadt, and how everything started for you. But now all these legends are coming through and talking about their history with Detroit and how they mold with the music, and of course they did. Right. But everybody's telling their story now, or writing their autobiography, or whatever it is. And when did you? I mean, everything takes the start, like your review, like the review did from the bargain review. Yeah, how cool! When did you dial it into focus for local? I mean, of course, there's always national.
Right. Well, it was always that, but really, that happened. By the time, it took 1981 was a real big year, because we had our first big office, not where we are now. It was across the street it was 303 House, South Hamilton, and still across from the pub and the stable. And but at that time, I was actually the paper was successful enough where, and it's a talent getting the right mix of people, like with a band and especially with a magazine or a paper, or whatever. And, I just had that right mix, There were some characters. I remember Tony Rocha, who used to work for the Saginaw News. He kind of left in disgrace there because he was found guilty of plagiarism or something like that, And anyway, but he came to me and he said, look, this was a whole messed up thing, but he goes, I've got a lot of great contacts. I got a lot of experience. I want to work with you. I want to help you. So he actually started out doing sales and did pretty good. But he was great because he had contacts, and that really helped. And he was plugged into music. and a lot of stuff. And so he was able to get us access and really, kind of get us into places that probably would have taken me much longer to do, being a new publisher, kind of unknown. He had his contacts.
Would this be contacts to like nationally known acts and so on?
Like when they came into town, and he knew the agents, he knew the people to reach out to.
Yeah, well, that was pretty great time for Saginaw. There were a lot of big name acts that would come to, well, at that time, Wendell Arena, I guess it was called, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's fabulous.
Yep.
When did you start the Music Awards?
The Music Awards I started in 1987.
So you'd been in business for about 8 years, roughly?
Yep.
What
years.
kind of take us through how
we
did
got that
come
idea?
in? Yeah, how did that
That's a great story I would love to share. So there was a band at the time called My Dog Bob that was legendary. And they were playing up at Mackinac Island one summer. And I was up there with my girlfriend at the time, just hanging out with them. They would stay at the island house, and then they would let, they would put them up there while they stayed there for 4 days. And so I went up there and was basically just crashing on the floor with my sleeping bag and hanging out with them and getting a free place to stay on the island while I could have fun and watch My Dog Bob at night and hang out with them. So anyway, the late Jim Schmidtke, who was a great guy, he was Kohner Watermelon, he was their keyboard player. And his wife at the time, Lydia, was up there. And one day we were just out on the afternoon, just, I don't know, sitting on the beach of the island or something. And I was talking to her and I said, I'd really like to do something musically somehow that, and she goes, there's so much happening now. You should just try to do like a local Grammy Awards or like a local People's Choice Awards and just put it together and, get some club to host it. And, it's not a bad idea.
Yes.
So that's actually how I got the idea, So that first one that we did was really interesting. We held it at the Fordney Hotel when it was still standing. And the Furlow brothers owned it at the time. And I remember they set up a really nice banquet. I remember we had no idea what to expect. Remember the bands that we had play at the time were, we had the Mick Furlow Band was the first rock band we had play at it. And they were doing really well. Iris Furlow was with the band. Donnie Brown was with the band at that time. Rick Brown, they had a really good lineup. Dean Banston was in the band at that time. He had quit Water for the Pool and was playing with them. And so we had them, and then we had Romeo Ridge, which was a really huge country band at the time. We had Silk was the jazz band, which was great. They had like Eddie Coburn, who was this, all those guys are dead now, but Eddie was like a really, really amazing pianist, composer. He actually had written songs with Doc Severinsen from The Tonight Show,
Wow.
Living here in Saginaw,
Wow.
So they were the jazz band at the time. And then we had the Boys of Joy as our R&B band, and that was really interesting because at that time they brought out a guitar player that was playing with them named Larry McCrae, and to my knowledge, that was the first time he ever really, when he was still in the shop and just not really. That's one of the first shows he played at. Yeah.
Did you have all the categories that you have now?
No, that always changes.
Was it? What do you had? Obviously, rock and soul. But you didn't do all the individual instruments and things like that.
No, we didn't have a lot of those miscellaneous categories and stuff that we do. We added those on. And even now, we streamline stuff. Like just to fit the times. Like when COVID was going down, we added in all the streaming categories and who's got the best streaming program. And, that's still kind of stuck around, as you guys know,
right.
But during those times, we weren't able to give any club awards away because the band clubs weren't doing any live music. So, drop that, add this. So, that's kind of the way that worked.
Yeah, that's amazing that you've had that going on. Would be well over.
Yeah. Well, the awards we just had.
You said
just had our
87?
we just had our 37th.
Yeah, I was going to say it's going on 4 decades. So wow, fantastic.
Yeah. So that's how that goes.
When you put that together and you were doing the awards, did you make a push to sell more ads, or how did you go about it to support the awards? I mean, you always hand out plenty of awards.
Yeah. Well, it was really interesting. I mean, the one we did at the Fordney, it was basically, they agreed to give us the room. They did the food and all that stuff, and then basically we just took the door, and the door covered all the expenses on it. We made a few bucks, not a lot, So as next year I thought, you know what? Tried it out. It was jammed. I mean, I'll never forget, So we knew we had to do it a big place, and I've always wanted to move it every year so it doesn't get associated with one place, and of course there were a lot more larger clubs back then. Like, the second year we were able to do it at Jasper's, which was right down. That's closed too now, but it was right down on the Saginaw River down.
The comedy club, right?
No, this was the one that's right on Niagara. Over down by by Ewald's.
My first one I ever attended before I played was at that comedy club.
Right, and then we did the comedy club, but then the year after that, I know we did it at the Red Elephant. I don't know if you remember that place. That used to be out between Bay City and Saginaw. It was Diane or Annette Bomarito and who else owned it? Mary Swanson had this club, and it was pretty cool. Now it's some corporate something. It's not a club anymore. But anyway, we did it there. I remember that was a total nightmare because it wasn't really set up. It was more set up like a disco type of thing, dance club. And we had to bring in cable from the Saginaw Civic Center to tap into the.
Really?
It was a real nightmare.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, and then we did it. One of the couple of years, great place we did it was down at the Empire Club down here, back when the Stedmans had it. That was just gorgeous, man. Because
that was quite a place when they first
had all
opened
those
it up.
video banks, and it just looked like a place down in Chicago or Detroit. It was so cool, and the sound was great in there, and then we just switch it all around. But really, what really helped was, like I say, by the third year we went to the idea of, okay, well, we'll just do a sponsorship program. So, that way we can put all the nominees in, get support from businesses to help underwrite costs and things like that. And then also to induce that support, I made a deal with all the sponsors that after the awards, when we do our special issue on profiling all the winners and that, they would get like special discounts that they could do in those issues. So that was of interest to them too. So, they signed on for that. So, so that helped, and that's basically it,
Well, you've obviously had a lot of incredible musical moments. You mentioned one, Larry McRae, probably playing in his first real public appearance. Are there any other musical moments over the years that really stand out?
Oh God!
I mean, I'm sure there's so many, but anything that really stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, oh God. Yeah, I remember in 1983, I had an opportunity to interview Jane Weedland from the Go-Go's, right when they were on their tour with the Police.
Wow.
And they were playing down in Detroit. I did a phone interview with her, which was really cool. I'd never seen the Go-Go's. I loved the band, though. And their album had just come out. It was really interesting because that tour, when they opened for the Police, I think it was like maybe 2 nights after that night I interviewed her that their first album went to #1. And they were actually selling more than the Police, but they started out as an all-night band, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll never forget at that show, just I was kind of on the side and had a photographer there, and anyway, I remember Jane Weedland just going across the stage doing this big kick, and just taking a guitar and just kind of winking, and I went, wow, this is really cool. I love this. But anyway, no, there's so many moments. I mean, I remember.
Did Dick
the
Wang?
Stooges. No.
Go ahead.
I remember before the magazine. I remember when I was in high school, I saw Iggy and the Stooges at Daniel's Den, and it was one of the first times they played there. I think I was in the 10th or 11th grade, and Iggy came out and he had just rubbed all this, I don't know what it was. I think it was honey or whatever. It was just rubbed all this stuff all over him, and he was just going out in the audience, and I remember everyone just partying there, they just were, he was so, and then all these girls being mesmerized by him, but I remember at one point he got out on the stage, and I can't remember what song it was, but I remember he did a stage dive into a group thinking they were going to catch him, and they all separated. He went right on the floor on a glass of beer, just a pop glass or whatever. There was something on the floor, and the glass just shattered, and he got up all bloody. That was rock and roll.
In fact, I was just watching an interview on David Letterman with Iggy, and I think he was talking about that very same incident.
He would do that a lot. I mean,
he said he saw a couple of girls that were kind of heavy, and so he thought maybe they'd catch him, and no, they just stepped away.
He was big into stage diving. He's amazing. I saw him on at Stooges reunion tour in 2007 down in Detroit.
Yes, I saw that too.
And we had photo passes for that, so I was up pretty close, and it was just amazing how he's really, of all the people of the Michigan canon of rock and roll history, did you think would still be,
right?
I mean, pretty vital. Still can move, still can dance, still can jump, still looks great,
Yeah.
And he's still putting music out. And I mean, I think he was #1 candidate to be
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's our Keith Richards.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Mike Beatty and I were in Detroit for a show a few weeks ago, and these ladies and this gentleman sat next to us, and she's like, heard Mike talk about the podcast here. She says, I was 14 soiling tickets for the Iggy show in Ypsi. Peanut butter and razor blades, man. I was there for the whole thing. Scared the crap right out of me, and that must have been right around that same time, He was rubbing peanut butter all over himself.
But I got to tell you, one of the most memorable things associated with the paper that I'll never forget was when the Doobie Brothers were playing here in Bay City, and it was the original band except for one member, I think, and I did an interview with the band, but I did the interview here live at Vets Park when they were doing a brunch. They were just cooking grills, and they had all their vans around and stuff like that. So I had to meet them at a designated time.
Is it like 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Yeah, I was there. They had a different bass player, but it was the rest
Remember
of the
that?
lineup. Yeah,
Yep.
That was a great show.
So I remember doing the interview, and their manager came out, and he was cooking this stuff, and he threw this cookbook down, and it was the Two Burner Gourmet, which was a cookbook that was written by one of my contributors, Terry Searfoss, who used to write a column for me called Piggin' Out with Foss. This guy was a huge sailor, and he wrote this. He wrote a cookbook with all these recipes and little anecdotes and stories about how you can do gourmet cooking on a boat with limited things, or if you're camping, how to do this, recipes for doing this. So you don't have to eat cans out of a beans out of a can. You don't have to do this. You can really put some good stuff together. And it was like, oh crap. So I'm seeing this book there. I go, where'd you get that book? And he goes, at a boat show in New York City. And he used to go and do that stuff, you know. So, I mean, here we're eating this thing, and I'm interviewing this band from this.
It's incredible.
I know, it is.
Full circle thing.
Exactly.
That was pretty crazy.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it was cool, you know. It was cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did Dick Wagner ever play at the Review?
He did. When he came back into town, I'm trying to think what year was that. That was
94 or 5?
right around when before he opened the studio right around there. Yeah. He did. And he when he came back to town, I put together a Lifetime Achievement Award for him. And it was really neat. I put together this little video. It was like a 15-minute clip of all these highlights. Had it professionally mixed with some old Bossman songs, but I had like old footage of him, just old stills basically, that I had gotten from Mary Ann, his manager at the time, in different sources. But I'll never forget, my friend Doug Moyles was working at TV5 at the time, and he told me he came across this footage of interviews that that he had done with Dick Fabian and Bob Dyer, talking about the times, about bringing the Frost in and first times they booked them and MC5 and stuff like that. So I was able to include that stuff in there. And then I had some pretty cool old photos that were pretty rare of him from the Welcome from My Nightmare tour that I included in there because he told me, Dick, and I got those from Dick, but he had told me that he lost a lot of that stuff in a fire when he was like when he was living in New York City, you know. Yep. So at the night of that tribute, afterwards, I can't remember what band was playing. It might have been TNT or something. I don't remember who was playing. But I'll never forget Matt Bessie was playing. It was one of Matt Bessie's bands, so it could have very well been the TNT Blues Band at the time. And Wagner and got on stage and jammed with Bessie, and that was pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I've got some video.
Well, he worked with Matt Bessie probably after that, I guess. Yeah, exactly.
But just to see those two guys shredding together was pretty neat, you know. But yeah, Dick, he was so happy. He was probably in his late 60s then, and you know, he was just so happy. I got photos of him, all these young girls were around him. He was like, oh yeah, boy, I'm glad I came back home.
Yep. Did you ever get Question Mark to play in the Review Awards? No,
just Bobby. But it's funny though, because my partner at the time, Jeff Scott, did an interview with Question Mark. It's one of the most bizarre interviews we've ever done. Sure. I should republish it. It's funnier than hell. Question Mark's going on about how basically you know, the Beatles and the Stones kind of stole his ideas and his look. And when Jeff asked about the Stones, he goes, you know, he says, well, they wrote this song called Bitch, and I wrote this song called If You Cross Me, Bitch, I'm gonna, you know, and stuff like that. And then he starts going into about, you know, extraterrestrials and different stuff. But it was interesting.
Wow. That'd be cute. Yeah. I've had plenty of times with him.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Have you ever heard of anybody who may have copies of some of the ads and interplay that Dick and the Bossmen used to do with WKNX? Bob Dyer and Dick Fabian?
I don't know what would happen to that footage.
Boy, I'd love to.
You know, it's really crazy.
Those.
It's kind of sad. I talked to, I can't remember his name. He's a younger guy. He reached out to me last year. He works at TV5 right now, and he sent me an email, or actually, I think it might have been through Facebook. He tagged me, but TV5 had found that Terry Surfloss, that guy I told you that did the cooking thing. Mm-hmm. Well, while he was doing that column at that time, he was able to do. He would do a 5 or 10 minute little similar thing for TV5. Where he would like talk about a recipe and stuff like that. So they dug it out of the file, TV5 did, and ran it in one of their, looking back sections, and they put it on, and I saw it. It was like he came back from the grave. I didn't know they still had that stuff. So I reached out to I said, this is so cool. I said, you wouldn't happen to know, would you, if you still have footage of our music awards? Because there's 3 years there where TV5 came and Brian Wood was there and they were doing it and all that stuff. And he said, I'll have to look. He goes, but it's just really sad. He goes, because so much of this stuff, these videotapes, he goes, all this stuff's on videotape and I'm having a hell of a time getting it transferred right now. He said, and the other problem is, he said, a lot at the time they really didn't have policies. A lot of these guys would just take their footage when they left and stuff like that, And he said, and then the other thing is just indexing. I mean, a lot of this stuff's just in big boxes, and it's just, which kind of amazed me.
Ooh, yeah.
But I mean, I get it. You can't keep everything, and especially when you're in the media, broadcast. Who knows what's going to be valuable?
Absolutely.
Did they record on 3/4-inch tape back then too?
I'm pretty sure.
Which is another issue.
Right.
3/4-inch tape. That's probably got to be rare to even find equipment that could use it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember I got that Led Zeppelin DVD thing they released on their, I think it was one of their 50th anniversary or 40th or whatever it was, but it was really complete 3 DVD set of all these live footage from different periods. And I remember reading an article about how some of that early footage that they had in there was filmed on Betamax.
Oh, man.
And it took them like 2 years to construct a Betamax player where they'd have to find a part here and find
gosh.
Just to restore that footage, know. I mean, so it's the trouble with formats.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, when you were growing up, were you writing before? I mean, you had the lawyer aesthetic.
Yeah.
Were you writing at that point?
When I was growing up as a kid, I was really into comic books. I subscribed to like all the Marvel comic books, X-Men, Fantastic Four, all that stuff, Avengers. When I went away, I saved them all. When I went away to college, and when I came back from England, I was like, hey, Mom, where's my comics? Oh, I gave them away. Cleaning the house. Well, you just gave away a fortune.
Okay. What the heck?
I mean, you think albums go for crazy prices, comic books go crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my first real musical experiences were, my dad was really into music. And my mom was too, but my dad was really into music. He had an extensive 78 collection, like I say, but he was really into Frank Sinatra, Dixieland Jazz, Etta James, all this great music, and I just remember listening to that growing up. But actually, when I remember when the British invasion broke, like so many, I was at that time, I was like 10 years old when the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan. And I remember after that, my parents got me a record player and I started getting all these 45s and stuff like that. The first concert I remember seeing live was Gary Lewis and the Playboys at Daniel's Den. They did a matinee show for like 6th and 7th graders or something. Really? And I remember going to that, and it was the loudest freaking concert I've ever been to in my life to this day. Because I don't know what it was, but my ears were ringing for 3 days. Ooh. You wouldn't think that about Gary Lewis.
Or the sound systems back then. But he was rocking.
That's probably what it was. We were all up front, and But I remember, man. Ding, ding. But I was bitten, And then shortly after that, I remember the first album I really bought on my own was the Beatles' Revolver, with my own money. Wow. When it came out in 1966. And then I just went from there,
Yeah. Yeah, Revolver is still one of my favorite Beatles albums.
that-
Especially, you know, of course, the American one was missing some crucial songs.
Right.
But yeah, that original 14-song album is
yeah,
something else.
Yeah. I mean, Rubber Soul. And,
That was the
Rubber
turning
Soul
point to
too.
me. those
Rubber
two
Soul and
records.
Revolver. are
Yeah,
my
that
two
was really...
favorites.
Actually, I like the American version of Rubber Soul better than the English one.
Yeah.
I just thought the songs on
It had all those
that
songs
was
that you could
they
never
were so
release
great.
today, like "Run for Your Life" and
Man. Yeah.
There you go.
And then, of course, at the end of Revolver, Tomorrow Never Knows.
Right.
Talk about a
One of
song
the
that,
best songs.
whoa,
Yeah,
man.
that was
But that was so revolutionary in 1966 to have
Well,
that.
I remember Paul McCartney, this interview I saw with him, he was saying when John first presented that, the whole song is in one chord, you know, and Paul was saying, okay, I mean, I get it, you know, this is the whole thing, and it's kind of Eastern in that, and I mean, we've done songs with only 2 or 3 chords before, but never just one chord, you know?
Yeah.
So, it all kind of evolved from there, but that always cracked me up. Yeah, I mean, I think that song's brilliant. You know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure is.
Yeah, the backwards drumming.
You know, all that tape cut up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the technology at the time, you know, it just blows my mind what those guys accomplished, and just, you know, like their first album they recorded in like a day and mixed it in a day, and you know, and then it takes some of these bands 2 years, millions of dollars.
Yeah. Now, taking it from all the way back to what you're doing, the people you met and the contacts you met before you headed overseas and then came back and decided to write, did you go right after them and say, hey, musicians and friends, or did they come to you?
Well, you know, basically, when I got back here, you know, the music thing, as far as the paper, I started out mainly doing, you know, album reviews.
Okay.
And then
but it was national album reviews.
Right.
It wasn't local.
Wasn't local. But I mean, there weren't that many
Yeah,
bands
right,
doing...
By that time.
Right.
I mean, you know, you
Yeah.
would have it, but I mean, it's not like CDs were really big then
Right.
yet. So, you know, you had to pretty much either release an album or a cassette. You know,
Yeah.
cassettes were really big there for a while. And you did have artists like, you know, I remember one of the first albums I did, I remember, speaking of that, you know, the way I transitioned was I went from those reviews and then I started interviewing all these local bands, you know. I mean, it was like, I remember the first big local band interview I did was, I want to say in 1980, it was with the Flies. You know, I did a big
Krogman and
Krogman, Mark
Miller.
Miller, and so
Fred Reif. He
yep,
managed them, I
Fred
believe.
was managing them. Yep, huge band, you know. Mark Miller, Dwayne Miller, Tommy Dolson, and Johnny Krogman. And they were huge. I mean, those guys would pack 400 people out at the Holiday Inn on every weekend, you know, and every club they'd play, they'd be huge, you know. So I did that in an interview with them. And then I would do it with different artists. But then I remember, like, the Opperman brothers, you know, with the New Reformation, they actually recorded a 2-sided album out at Beginnings, which was a dining restaurant
Right.
club.
We had that on one of our shows,
You
when
know.
we interviewed.
And
Dave.
so, you know, that came out. So then I would interview those guys and then review the album. And then it just kind of like expanded more and more from that. I remember Mike Brush. I mean, his first album came out and we did a big interview and, you know, did a review of the album, you know. That's so funny too, you know. I was up at Radio Wasteland a few weeks ago, up in Midland, and they've got that local section, you know, and I saw Mike's first album unopened up there, and it had a little sticker on it, you know. It said legendary mid-Michigan jazz artist from the 80s, and it was like $25 sticker on it, and I'm like going, wow, back then I think he was charging like, you know, $2 for it. But again, it's appreciation, you know?
Yeah.
It's cool, but it's cool the way it all
Comes
flows.
around.
Yeah.
Now you're I mean, you went to school with some of the guys that are musicians too, like didn't and so were they well, I mean, you were there for all the changes over the years. What was the part where you let that take over more? I mean, when it became more like local music's definitely one of the big things about it now.
Right.
When did that become like a overbearing thing, and it was run alongside with the political parts of the paper?
Well,
and the local stuff that you put in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like it's always about balance.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like that's why. Thankfully now, with online edition, I can do more of everything. But, it's kind of like that situation I ran with that interview and review I wanted to do with your album, It's like, okay, we got this much space, this much thing, have to do this this is going to... So I try to do at least one musical-oriented thing each issue. If I can do two things in there, great, and the arts has shifted so much too. We do a lot more with theater now. We do a lot more with, national stuff. Thankfully, we've still got Midland Center for the Arts and the Temple, and they're bringing in some really major acts. So through them, I've been able to get some. Yeah. When they come in, I'm able to get good interviews with the nationals, which I still love to do.
Oh, yeah.
Art Garfunkel, that was a great interview I had with him. That was memorable,
Yeah.
And I've still got that on tape. That was so funny. He was like in some hotel room in New York City or something getting breakfast at the time. And just a minute, wait, room service here. So I'm waiting 3 minutes, So... You're from Saginaw, huh? And I go, yep. And he starts singing the opening lines.
America, yeah.
Right.
And of course, when he played here, he didn't do it. Didn't play the song. But anyway.
Well, it's the Paul Simon composition. Maybe that had something to do with it.
Right. But so it's just a call, And the thing is, right now, like with politics. We'll do like maybe one thing. We put that more into editorial unless it's actually an election season or there's actually news going on, because it's so divisive and fractured right now, and it's just
we keep up with the moment, which you have to do, otherwise you're missing it.
Yeah,
well, especially being online now. So
yeah. So it's just a question of balance, and I'm fortunate too. I have been as I get older. I really do need a crop of younger writers and more kids that are plugged into the younger bands coming up. Which I've been fortunate over the decades. Like the 2000s, Randy Chandler was writing for us a lot. He was a great guy, great musician. He passed away a year or two ago. Died on stage of all things.
Yeah,
had a heart attack. That was a shock, I was really close to Randy. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
And he came up with that whole generation. Actually, like with Noel and all that crop of
Polk.
Melissa May and all those guys, Polk, all those guys, Jeff Yance, they were all coming up. And Randy, Randy would say, hey, we got to do this, we got to do this. So, you got to have someone plugged in,
Yeah.
And, right now, it's so hard right now, in a sense, because to find out new music, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless you don't have radio stations anymore, giving you guideposts or playing this local stuff, so you got to either search it out or go on Spotify or go on. Well, I mean, it's like.
Well, for a while, you even had a local radio station you were streaming.
How
long did that last?
Was unfortunate. We wanted to start this thing called Review This Radio.
Yep.
And actually, that was an idea that I don't know if you remember Lauren Davis at all, but yeah, she used to work at Wheels, and she had a band, and so anyway, when she left left that, she approached me about, it would really be cool to try to do this, local streaming radio station, and we'll just play all this stuff and basically put it together and sell ads. And so, we put a really serious game plan together on that and business proposal on it, and had a partner, my partner the guy, my good friend of mine, Andrew Lay, at the time, he was my web developer, and he was really plugged into music too, and hip hop. So he was good too, because he's younger and was able to. And at the time we put together this proposal, there was a friend of mine who was out at SVSU running the Dow Entrepreneurial Program, and which basically their whole purpose was to take this $1 million. It wasn't that much. It was a lot of money. I can't remember the actual amount, but Dow had put together a package to incubate businesses, new startups and stuff like that, So we were hoping that we could get that, and at the time it looked like we were going to, but at the last minute it kind of fell through. So the minute we lost the potential for the funding on it, it was just too unrealistic to take it on with everything else.
Gotcha. It lasted, what, 2 years? A year?
No, we only, that
Year?
review, the radio, it only lasted, unfortunately, about 6 months.
Oh, it seemed like longer.
I know.
I just remember turning it on, seeing a lot of the same ads in
it was the same
rotation.
thing. It took a long time to really edit it, and without the right equipment. And see, what we needed to do that right was basically get a right proper mixing board and all this other stuff. And
Yeah.
it just didn't work out. But, you try,
Yeah.
you just throw it up. And it was, I still think it'd be a great thing to do because, it was fun to do, because you get all these CDs in and, I remember we'd play a song by the Banana Convention, play something by Stu Frankie, play something by
I'd be on
Mike
there.
Rush,
Yeah.
you'd be on
Muddy
there.
Gumbo, I think, was even on
Muddy
there.
Gumbo,
Larry.
Empty Pockets, Larry, all that stuff. And people were listening, I remember Tom Wood called me from, that's when they had, what was that restaurant in Franklin with Glen? I can't think of it. But anyway, yeah, we listened to it every morning.
Oh, that's cool.
But it is, Anyway, what are you going to do? Just move on. So
It's more time consuming and time and money,
Right.
That's everything.
Right.
Where did you get the desire to always lead your stories with an old quote?
I like to set a tone for the piece based from what I find to be almost like words of wisdom from people that kind of are aligned with whatever the story's about.
You
what
really
this
dig
person
deep
is.
for some stuff sometimes, and it just
Yeah.
happens to tire. Yeah, obviously, it's there for a reason. It's not
Right.
just there to have a quote on every page. It's there.
No.
I just wonder where your desire. I mean, all of a sudden it became. I noticed it. I don't know if it was when I was becoming an upcoming journalist or maybe even before that. But
Well,
it's a
I've
big
always,
thing for you.
I've always I'm a very copious reader. Actually, when I was in high school, I read a lot. And I started an underground newspaper in high school too with some friends. Actually, Vern, who helped me start the Voice, and my friend Jeff. So from that, I'm fortunate in the sense I'm able to retain quotes and things that I've read that kind of stick with me.
Wow.
So a lot of times if I'm reading or writing a piece or thinking about a topic or something, a profile, if it's a profile on an artist, I'll think of something they said that aligned with something else and do that.
You'll go back and remember that and dig up that quote.
And then I'll dig it up. Yeah.
That's awesome.
What high school did you go to?
Arthur Hill.
And what grade were you in when you did this underground papers? This is sort of like the forerunner to the review in a way.
Right, it was. Yeah,
What did you write about? Did you do music?
Well,
and that
actually,
kind of
it was.
stuff?
I've still got all the issues too. It was called the Democratic Voice, and we were a bunch of radicals. Kent State happened when we were in 10th grade.
Sure.
You know, it was interesting. We got elected. I got elected to senior class representative. We decided to put together a political ticket and run on a platform. So we had like 10. We went to my friend Jeff's. Actually, it was a summer in Wixom Lake one weekend, and we wrote like our own Port Huron statement. It was like 10 things that we want for, like, you know, rights and responsibilities committee for students, and a student rights thing, and this and this and this. And we campaigned at a political party platform type thing. And I got elected senior class rep. Trying to think, it was the secretary on the ticket got elected, the treasurer on the ticket got elected, everybody got elected on the ticket except for the president. So from that, you know, yeah, we did some crazy stuff.
How successful were you in terms of implementing some of the things?
Oh, we
your
did.
Points?
We got actually at that time we were able to get several things. We were able to get our own morning communication things, so the secretary could read all the things we wanted the students to know in the morning. We were able to. At the time, there was a lot of unrest going on, racial unrest between the issue of that, between Saginaw High and Arthur Hill. So the superintendent at the time wanted to put together a crisis committee where we could have access to the board president, anybody we want. So we got on that along with students so we had this really tight access, and we were able through that to get birth control counseling on campus.
Wow.
We were able to get, they let us hold this dance and sale where we were able to take all this money that we raised. And I remember myself and the treasurer and secretary went down to Ann Arbor one day, just blew off school and went down, hit a bunch of bookstores and bought all these real cool books like Army of the Night and all these radical books that we put in the library. I don't know if they're still there or not, but that was fun. So yeah, we were able to do quite a bit, and that really ignited the bug. You know, that really lit my fire about it.
How did you print those?
Interestingly enough, this girlfriend I was dating at the time, her mother worked for the MSU Extension Service, and she was able to use their mimeograph machine and just mimeograph them up and donate them.
Wow. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. Wow. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Do you still have your Mickey Mouse machine from your first thing?
Oh, I wish I did, but I don't.
That'd be a piece of history
I know, man. That light table was so funny, but no.
I remember my first journalism classes in the mid-'90s, we were still laying them out, you know.
Well, that's what I really
Then we were working on the Mac for part of the day, like this is a new thing, but you weren't doing layout on there. No. Not till a couple years later. Then layouts
I really miss that, you know, because, I mean, back then, you know, that was a challenge. I remember, you know, you had to set everything on these, like, CompuGraphic typesetting machines, and they were done on film. So you'd have to bring this film out, and then you'd have to run them through processors, let the film dry. Then you'd have to coat it with wax, lay it out on these tables.
Oh, yes.
It took forever.
Yes.
And those machines were not cheap. Like, I mean, I remember the lease payment back then in '81 was something, the machines cost something like $70,000. The lease payment was like $600-700 a month on top of print bills. But fortunately, because nobody else had desktop publishing, that wasn't around yet, you know. We made a lot of money doing outside work, like, you know, laying out business cards, laying out brochures, laying out, to the point where that's another thing that really helped the paper grow besides the singles only, was we had that ancillary revenue coming in. I mean, the outside jobs we were doing like cable, Cox Cable at the time, now it's Charter, of course, but they would retain us to do these big 70,000 mailers and lay out these 5-page, inserts, or, the Temple Theater would have us do their newsletter, or, so all that stuff was actually making as much revenue as the actual revenue from the ad sales in the paper.
Wow.
So
were you bi-weekly all
along? We were, yeah.
So you had to ram everything in, plus the issue.
But you see, that's what I mean. Because of that, I couldn't do it alone, and that's why it wouldn't be expanded. And that's when then I got in art designers, typesetters, keyliners. But my point was that you had an actual staff. You had like an editorial staff, production staff, and I really miss that now, because that's part of the whole heart
vibe.
Family
it's
of
a
the
vibe.
of the paper, and all those people in the late hours, and just the parties, the fun, just I mean, it was just totally different, and I miss that. I mean, it's
perspectives, other people's perspectives.
Yeah,
just not even. If
I mean, every
wrong.
morning, before we'd start work, we'd have these meetings, and people would just talk about different stuff. What are we going to do for the next issue? What's happening? Over coffee and donuts, and I miss doing that, and it's not the same doing it over Zoom, and it's not the same, I mean, it's like now my designer lives in freaking, she's in Arlington. I mean,
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's all done over
Virginia. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Now your last designer passed away. He was over in.
Yeah, he was in Grand
Rapids, right?
Yeah.
He was there for a long time.
Yeah.
Wow. You've had some brilliant artists and layout people though over the years.
Yeah. Dave was a close friend of mine. Yeah, he passed away a couple of years ago. Yeah, that's what happens. A lot of those people, and they just go away. They're, like Sue White,
Oh, my mentor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you heading, Bob? Is there anything on the horizon for you that's different or that you're looking at? I mean, you've done this longer than anybody.
Yeah. It's what I do. People say to me, like, are you ever going to retire? And I'm like, if I can't walk or write or read or so we get like some affliction, but I mean, it's like, this is what I've worked at. This is what I do. I mean, it's what I do. And I don't know, like I waited until, I turned 67 to take my Social Security and all that stuff, which I am doing now. But I'm not going to retire, because when people retire, they die. I'm sorry. But no, I've seen that happen to too many people. They just lose a sense of what, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what your goals are in life. You know what I mean? But, and I shouldn't say that, because I have a lot of friends who, they're happily retired. But I've also know a lot of people that, they kind of lose their sense of purpose and placement and whatever. And then for whatever reason, they just go. I mean, I've had a lot of friends that, I don't know why, but, after they retire, they're like dead within a year, it seems.
Yeah, there was that quote about, life doesn't have a finish line on it. You just, keep on keeping on what you love to do. I mean, you love to do this, obviously.
Because it's not like, to me, it isn't. Yeah,
it's work, but it isn't work.
It isn't. It's a labor.
Yeah.
There's a difference between work and labor,
Well, that's a good way of putting it.
But yeah, my own goals right now, I'm trying to do two things. One is I've been in discussions with the Saginaw County Castle Museum about trying to do something similar to what they're doing with the Saginaw Sports Hall of Fame there. Mainly what I'm trying to do is find a place where I can put all my archive of print editions for 43 years.
Yes.
So it'll be accessible.
That was going to be an off the mic afterwards question.
That. And then I'm also trying to get it digitized, I mean, which we're doing good. Like on our online edition right now, we've got at least a good 15 years of back issues on there right now. But I'd like to get all the stuff that, get it digitized, all the old issues and all that stuff done. And that's going to take manpower and work. So what I'm working on doing is trying to, get some funding grants together, or see if I can get some entities to somehow handle that. Like I've got a friend down at the State of Michigan Library System that might be able to help get a lot of the stuff input and scanned and things like that.
A lot of work.
But it is a lot of work. And so, like I say, I'm in discussions for that. But I do want to find a way to do that. And my idea is, I've got a lot of archive materials too, like you say, photos that, would make good, you could like switch around, do different exhibits, different topics. I've saved every old computer I've ever had.
Really?
So I have those you can display.
Wow.
And just a lot of artifacts. Posters that have been signed, things like that.
Cool.
But other than that, I'm kind of working too to try to find, like right now, the staff I'm working with, I've got some people that are really dedicated. So, I'd like to probably try to work out something where I can transition them into it if they're willing to, But other than that, what do you do? It's like, I'm not really game on selling it, but it's not something I wouldn't be averse to doing, if I could get the right type of ownership entity, and and also kind of groom whoever came in. Maybe do like an ancillary contract for a year or two to just transition people in and get them up.
Were you thinking about if you sold it, you would stay on as sort of in an advisory capacity? Yeah, right. That would be great. You could still do what you love to do.
Right. Because, there's a lot of value. It's got, branding, inherent value and legacy, and and we've got a solid marketing base, solid ad base. So, there's different ways to do it. I actually, as part of that, was trying to go about getting it appraised, and ironically, a guy reached out to me from New York who's really, really good, and he's appraised like the New York Post, national stuff all over the world, and so he's real interested in taking it on. He gave me a list of all the things I need to do, but the downside is it costs like $6,000 for the appraisal.
Oh, yeah.
But so I don't know.
Yeah, but it'd be valuable to know.
No, at some point it's going to have to get done. But that's what maybe I could get grants or something.
Right. Yes. People.
I'm working on trying to.
People that listen to this, reach out to Bob.
No, I have actually been thinking about starting a GoFundMe campaign for the archive to get that all, put together. But like I say, we're in discussions and with different people. I just haven't had the time to really do it much this year yet because of between the awards and everything else going on right now.
Yeah. So. No, the awards, I wanted to jump back on that just briefly. You've always gone Bay City, Saginaw, Bay City. Has there been a Midland one at all?
No, there hasn't, because we haven't been able to find a venue to do it.
Okay. There's none that size, just the right size there. Yeah. It makes sense. I wondered.
There used to be the Rock and Roundup up there. Yeah. And, some really... they got great venues, but it's just not for that.
Would the Center of the Arts ever be interested in hosting
I don't know.
something
I could probably pursue it, but the thing is, possibly. But the thing is, you got to have a liquor license. You got to have.
Yeah.
It's funny how about 10, 12 years ago, maybe. We were used to be called the Tri-Cities, and then our branding had to change to the Great Lakes Bay region. But it's always still going to be the Tri-Cities in my head and how we approach that, But I always wondered back in the day, before my time as a musician, maybe you've been to Midland. Because I remember people saying there was the Rock and Roundup, and there was something else out there.
Well, the Blue Light was a very big teen club there for a few years.
Oh, there used
60s.
to be so many cool clubs.
They had some major acts come in through the Blue Light.
Yeah. And then Boy, I mean, in Bay City too, you know. I mean, you think about it, they had cruisers going on, and they had at least a half dozen clubs on Midland Street, and then
Right.
you know, had Club Empire. They had that place. What was that? I can't remember it. Used to be right down here when you first pull on Washington. It was on the corner there. I can't remember.
Backstreets.
Backstreets.
Yeah, the Burdens used to play
Burdens
there
used
quite
to play
often.
there a
Yes.
lot.
So Larry used to talk about
Larry
Backstreets.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's long gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we were talking earlier, there's not too many live music
It's sad.
venues
you know,
anymore.
It really
Yes.
is. Yeah. I mean, there's only a couple really, you know, places that do it religiously, week to week, day to
Right.
day. You know, and Saginaw, that's the pub and White's, and I mean, here it's what
BMO's.
BMO's and Scotty's. Yeah.
It's funny, we had all the guests that have come through here from all over the Michigan, and they're like, you could play 7 days a week if you wanted.
Right.
All the way up to about 1992, 93, 94, and then it started trickling away. And I could see their ad revenue, and you said it was hot in 81, and you really got the review awards going by the late 80s. I mean, everybody was playing everywhere all the time.
You know, it did it.
Different levels.
You know, it did it. What really killed it was two things: Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and government.
Really?
To say it,
Yeah.
but yeah, because at the time, you know, I remember that because we did a lot of coverage on it, and you know, they kept trying to reduce the intoxication level. I mean, it used to be at a certain level, but you know, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers said, "Oh no, you know, too many people are dying." When actually, statistically, there were more people dying from like taking prescription medications, and you know. But I mean, that was what was targeted. So of course, they lower the level to the point where you only have to have maybe 2 beers in 1.5 hours or 2 hours to be legally intoxicated, you know.
Right.
And then people get afraid to go out.
Well,
And then, you know, and then the court battles come, but then government goes, oh, you know, oh no, well, we can like, you know, get more revenue by charging people on these DUIs and charging people on this and charging people on that. And then before you know it, you know, and then insurance rates go up, and then, you know, tax rates go up for the bars.
Everybody got their money except for the bar end of it.
And then, you know, and I mean, you know, when you look at today, I mean, what's sad is it's like now the only place bands really have to play in the summer are all these festivals.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, you know. I mean, it's like, that's all really cool, and I love the festivals. But I mean, I was just doing input for like our issue coming out next week or so on for July and August, and I mean, there must be at least 2 festivals a night in some place happening all through the next 6 weeks. I mean, easily, you know.
Wow.
How can bars compete with that?
Right.
I mean, this is all free. They can't, you know.
Right.
And what's interesting about that is I asked a friend of mine who works on a committee about that. He was telling me for one of the festivals, you know, I said to him, how do all these places afford these bands for all these festivals, you know? I mean, some of them are pretty expensive, and some of these little burgs, I don't even know where they're getting. And he was telling me that, he said, you would not believe the money that's available for that from the state for municipalities. Like if you're like say a public service group, like say something like Friday Night Live, which is put on by Pride, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they put on a great festival and they work with the budget they have. But if you're a municipality like Thomas Township or like, you know, whatever, and you put on those Red Key Park festivals or Saginaw County, whatever, there's big money available from the state for the municipalities to do that, which is cool. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But again, what's a bar to do? How can they do live music in the summertime? I mean, it's just and of course, who gets hurt from it all? You know, are the musicians, because they're not paid that much. You know?
So are you talking about things like the party on McCarty and?
Well, that's
is that a separate thing?
The party on McCarty is actually put on by the soccer complex. That's to fund the soccer complex.
Oh, okay.
What I'm talking about is like things like for example, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how it works with these Winona Park things, but I mean, if the city's involved or municipalities involved, they can get a lot of money from the state.
Well, I know Mike Basciagalupo is really good at writing grants.
Right, and that's what I mean.
So
There's a lot of grant money available
right.
from the state to do that.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's great that they could do that. I mean, and it's open to civic organizations too, like the soccer complex and stuff like that. But I mean, I guess if you're a municipality, it's a lot
easier
to get that money from the state, because I think they budgeted. I think they got a lot of money out of that. I think it might be COVID money or something that they can use for that. Yeah.
Well, that's just another reason, and we kind of preach it here, to support local music.
Right.
That means you go out to the bars that are putting on live music and you support them. I mean, that's, if you want the music, you have to do that. You know, so.
You know, and there's really a lot of these younger promoters are doing a great job with stuff. You know, they're doing a lot of those shows over at Masonic Temple. A lot of those younger shows. Those are real cool.
The Excellency and all them.
Excellency, those guys, man, they're doing a great job, I think, you know. And I actually reached out to him he reached out to me about how next year for the Music Awards he wants to become more involved to help engage younger, you know, bands coming up, you know, which is what I need, like I talked about before.
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah. That young blood and the who's on the scene and sees
what's happening, you know.
Underground.
Yeah, that's where it all happens, you know.
I got a last question for you. 79 Review Magazine. I go to play in Grand Rapids. There's REVUE magazine. And then, you know, you got your Detroit, the Metro Times and the Detroit News, or the free ones, you know, like yours. Were all them around before? Or who was first?
Basically, okay, Michael Moore started the Flint Voice the same year I started the Review.
Okay.
He sold that. Well, actually, he got. I think the Voice lasted until about, I want to say 82, maybe 83, and then he got involved with. He got an editor job at Mother Jones, national editor job, and so that disappeared. In 1980, about a year after I started the Review, the Metro Times started. And I actually knew the original publishers. They were a male-female duo that started the original one. And that went really well. I mean, you know, that was around the time then Stu Franke, of course, you know, he was writing for them and doing great interviews. He did a lot of writing for them, you know. And he was actually, I would publish some of the stuff he ran, the interviews he did, because I remember he did some great interviews with like Bob Seger and Roseanne Cash and, you know, different artists.
I've seen
that exist down there.
I remember Stu's stories being in there as well as up here, and then Real Detroit stepped on him for a little while. I don't know if that's still going.
Right. No.
That was another free magazine that was just like
Yeah.
And then you go up to Traverse City, you got the Graphic.
They had the Express.
And the Express, There's a Graphic up, maybe that's Petoskey or something, but there's they popped out all over. I mean, as a young,
you know, through the Express, I that's how I met Christy Cates. She was writing for me for a while. Yeah.
She's always done those reviews.
Yeah, she's not with them anymore.
No.
No. Well, they sold it.
Oh, okay.
The publisher sold it a few years ago.
Oh, and then my funny thing was we found ourselves in the Review magazine in Grand Rapids or Kalamazoo area. You know, that's where that's
right.
And it's like, who's on first? You know.
I know. Well, you know, we started out with Bay Area Bargain Review.
Right.
Then we were Bay Area Review.
Yep.
And you know, but that was just hard. It's like Bay Area Review. It's just too much. So it's like just short it to Review.
That's awesome.
Review. That's it.
Well, thank you, Bob, for
my pleasure.
All these years of all your support, of everything you've done. I don't care who you are in the Tri-Cities or the Great Lakes Bay region, but even though you trickle all the way through the state, around the country, man, you've done it all, man, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
It's been
pleasure.
great.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
A terrific episode, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. All right.
All right. Thank you, guys.
The MMHP is hosted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our own Libsyn podcast site. You can also search MMHP 989 on Facebook for up-to-the-minute information, as well as both Dr. J and Sir Fred's album picks of the week, posted every weekend. Don't forget to look for Mr. Mike's local music live series, posted frequently on MMHP's Facebook hub, as well as Scott's Mid-Mitten 15 from Harvest Canteen, featuring one-on-one interviews with Michigan music artists. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, Mr. Mike at YouTube at Mr. BT1. That's MRBTEE and the number 1. Brought to you by Michigan Rock and Roll Legends, located both inside the Bay County Historical Museum on Washington Avenue, as well as Scotty's Sandbar on Evergreen Drive at the Bay City Middle Grounds.
On behalf of our hosts, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and myself, this podcast wouldn't have been here without the voice of the MMHP, Mr. Eddie Switek, the generosity of the Bay County Historical Museum, which hosts the Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame,